Good day, everyone. Welcome to our Public Kinship Conversation today with our featured guest, Dr. Thomas Legrand. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce the two speakers today, Dr. Bobby William Austin. Dr. Austin is president of Neighborhood Associates, and for over 30 years, Dr. Austin has worked as a sociologist, author, educator, and CEO of national nonprofits to strengthen the social fabric of urban neighborhoods. He is recognized for his work in American culture and public kinship. Dr. Austin's leadership on the National Task Force on African American Men and Boys led to the 1996 report, Repairing the Breach, and launched philanthropic efforts to reach more than 17,000 young Black men in the U.S. Dr. Austin currently leads our approach to public kinship and repairing the breach strategies. Dr. Thomas Legrand, author of Politics of Being, tuning in from southwest of France. Thomas Legrand is a wisdom seeker, social scientist, and sustainability practitioner living next to Plum Village, the monastery of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, holding a doctorate degree in economics and having studied international development, political science, and management. Dr. Legrand works in the field of sustainability for UN agencies, private companies, and NGOs. His focus is on forest conservation, climate change, sustainability, and organizational transformation.
I want to say this has been a long time coming. Dr. Thomas and I have been communicating for well over a year and a half, I know. His book, when I found out about it, he was finishing it up, Politics of Being. If you don't have it in your library, your living room, your wherever you read, you actually need it. Politics of Being, Wisdom, and Science. And therein lies the catch, wisdom and science. It's something that we are working through in this country. A wonderful scholar by the name of Professor Waldron out at Santa Fe Institute writes about chaos, complexity of chaos. We are certainly in the midst of the complexity of chaos. And it doesn't mean what you might think it means. What he says it means is this, and this is what Professor Legrand does so well. The idea is societies come to a point where they are so complex that they seem as if they're going to fall apart. But in his work, he says that's when people, as the hip hop people would say, get busy. And these are some busy people on the line. And when they get busy, what they do is they take that chaos and they create a new creativity. That something new and wonderful blooms and blossoms from the idea that we are on the precipice. Sounds dangerous, but it sounds real. And so what I want to begin with is first have Thomas introduce himself. You can always do that better in your book, the wonderful, wonderful book, and tell us a little bit about what is wisdom-based science informed on and how does it inform politics? Because I think Europe is having its issues. We're certainly having our issues. So I'm going to let you just, as I had a friend who was a malaprop, and he would say things like, I'm just going to sky blue it. So it took us a little while to understand. He wasn't saying sky blue it, he was saying blue sky it. So I'm gonna let you do that right now. So if you would give us the blue sky version, or the sky blue it version of Politics of Being. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Thank you, Ming. Hello everyone, and glad to be with you today. So I've been working on this book for the last 10 years, And it really brings these three areas of my life. One, my spiritual path, which started in Mexico some 20 years ago with an encounter with native spirituality. The other one is more the academic part. I have a PhD in ecological economics. And the last one is I'm a sustainability professional. I work with particular UN agencies. And I've, especially as an environmentalist, we could say, and I've come to the conclusion that this development paradigm that we are living into, which emphasize economic growth, or let's say having, is really too antagonistic to what we need to maintain the conditions for life to strive on this planet. And when you really look at what is at stake, I think we recognize that we need a very profound shift, a shift of consciousness, a cultural evolution. And this shift is so profound that it comes back, I would say, to redefine what we prioritize in our lives at the individual, but also at the collective level. So the politics of being proposed to make being, instead of having and economic growth, our main collective goal. And in this book, I show where are the seeds of this new development paradigm in many different communities, emphasizing different spiritual values, as I call them. Bobby, you mentioned, complexity theory, etc. So that is, I have a chapter on that, and the recognition of interconnectedness. There are, other people who, are telling us we should harmonize ourselves with how nature works, and like the regeneration movement, for example. Other people emphasizing love, compassion, empathy, the golden rule, for example. I know it's very dear to you. Others talking about happiness, and this becoming also very influential for some governments. Other emphasizing culture of peace, culture of partnership, or even mindfulness. So I'm saying, all these values kind of reflect our spiritual values, because they reflect spiritual development. They reflect a sense of absolute. And for each of these values, we have had science developing in the last decades, and we have also very concrete social change, political initiatives based on that. And by bringing them together, they can help us design very concrete policy agendas in many sectors. In this book, I cover 9 sectors, from education to health, justice, governance, nature, etc. So to say that, we can and bring together, have a very deep, I would say, almost spiritual, wisdom-based perspective on development, but also very concrete in terms of what we can do today to put that into practice. And I think if you read the book, you'll probably recognize that we have all what we need to create this kind of new, more advanced civilization. If we all put together, these different policies, and it's all based on real examples, it will definitely make a huge leap forward for our societies. So that is what, in a word, is politics of being. Bobby, you're on mute.
I have not been on this kind of work for some time, so I forget you have to push buttons to get in. But you beautifully explained what is really a tremendous, it's a masterpiece of a book, and it is obvious that many hours and many years went into its making. But I do need to ask questions, I hope you don't mind, that are somewhat tangential to the American situation. There was a time when I thought Americans were very idealistically Christian. And so I'm going to ask you about this sharing of common values that human beings share around the globe and interact. Because I'm beginning to wonder, I'm not beginning, I'm not that naive. We really in this country are seeing that we do not share the same set of values, ethical principles, and ideals. And I think it's shocking to people of my age group because we came through the civil rights movement, and say what you will or may about blacks, whites, or whoever, there was a shared and a common sense of both our destiny and what we ultimately believed in. I worry if there are people in our country today are even interested in freedom, because as I heard this strange person the other day talking about winning elections, and what she said was, I don't care as long as I win. And somehow that doesn't settle too well. And that's what we just went through with our last president. So tell me a little bit, how do you think we, because Public Kinship would like to join you, how can we turn this around? How can we make some headway in creating a new sense of who we are and shared values and ideals? I know that you worked with Dr. King. I know you worked with Thich Hunt. There's so many wonderful people. I have worked with some great people, Patricia Roberts Harris, all these various people who were leaders, are leaders. Some are past and gone. The three I just named are. But in fact, led us through a tumultuous time, chaos. We're at the edge of chaos, and we created something beautiful. How do you see your book and your work gathering that kind of spirit once again?
Yes, thank you, Bobby. Yeah, as I was mentioning, to me, these spiritual values are universal, so they can help the world unite around them, and they have been at the center of virtually all spiritual traditions. So there's a lot about being able to reconnect to the true message of these spiritual traditions, and also about traditional wisdoms in many countries, in particular in the global south. I think what is happening in the US at the moment is what has been called a cultural backlash, and it's happening in other countries, in Europe as well. And if you look at the work of that, I'm sure you know the work of sociologists studying the evolution of values, such as Ronald Inglehart. He explained quite well, why, where does that come from, and the role, especially of inequalities, right, and economic inequalities in the, producing this kind of cultural backlash. Of course, there is globalization, there are migrations, but how can we make people more secure so that they don't come back to this kind of more survival values and the appeal of strong leaders and force, and getting back to a narrow sense of community and identity, right? But I would say more fundamentally, I would say, and I'm in the book, I'm using the work of Charles Eisenstein, who said like this big cultural shift we need to do is moving from the story of separation that has originated in the Western world and with modernity around a set of specific values like reductionism, individualism, materialism, anthropocentrism, etc. So, and we see that, especially new understanding in science, etc. All the narrative that comes with that is starting to be obsolete. Like science is telling us more and more different stories about the world, and also they no longer work. And I think because of the state of the world now, which is where everything is much more integrated, interconnected, etc. So they can't help us, get us through the challenges we are now facing. So we need to move to a different cultural narrative, a different set of values that brought together, Eisenstein called that the story of interbeing, where we recognize that we are fundamentally interconnected and we strive in relationships. And that's what, all the happiness science, for example, is telling us, rather that happiness is not coming from, how much money or power you have, but rather from the relationships you have with yourself, with one another, and with nature. So I think the US has been very far, maybe among the furthest into that story of separation. And so it is experiencing really a lot of the problems that come with that. And the challenge now is to move toward a new story, a story of interbeing.
I absolutely agree with you. And that this is often the issue. The people we all agree with, and so we don't seem to have an inroad to those that we don't. For instance, there's a wonderful book, I can't think of the author nor the exact title, but it has to do with the unraveling of what he calls white Christian America. And I think this is at the very bottom of the discussion that we are dealing with, because at the heart of what's going on now in our country is a battle over values and ethics and ethical behavior between various types of groups, both cultural and racial. More cultural than racial, actually. But having said that, I like the way you put it. How can we, so we can be positive today, me, not you, how can we materialize what you just told us? How can we organize to create this new world movement? I wrote a book, and I'm not saying do that. I wrote a book called I'll Make Me a World right after 9/11. Few people read it, so we didn't make a new world, but there's a lot of stuff in there that we could use. How can we connect to do this? Because I think it's going to take some work. I think you as a thought leader are obviously leading in that. We as people on the ground, on grassroots democracy can, and the whole idea of public kinship can be of great service in this new idea. I'm not saying new world order, because when you say that in America, oh my goodness, you just, their hair stands on like, yeah, oh, 2,000 years ago, we had a new world order, we don't need it. So you really have to be careful. We do with language that we use. So I really would like you to help me with that, because I think you say that societies progress as they increasingly honor the highest values, qualities, and ideals, such as freedom, goodness, beauty, truth, understanding, happiness, love, and peace. How do we get people to understand that?
Well, I think there are two, at least two different approaches. One is, how do we create the social context, through our institutions, through our education system, through our justice systems, through our governance systems, etc., our health systems, there's mental health, etc. How do trauma healing, etc. So that's one part of the story, because all these behaviors, evolution of values are created by the society, the social context in which we live in. And I would say, if people are better equipped in life, whether it is economically, whether it is, I'm talking I have a full chapter based on parenting, and how we can, because, even secure attachment, is really the basis for human flourishing and for developing some of these values. How do we create conditions for better mental health, also look in the past and heal, historical traumas, etc. How do we have, when we are dealing with criminality, how can we have a more restorative justice systems? When we are dealing with political discussion, can we have other frameworks for that support more civic values, etc., instead of the algorithms that we have now on social media that prime the most extreme voices. So that's one part of the question, and I go through great details on that in the book. I think the other part is also at the individual levels, to change ourselves and how do we relate to one another, and really what we see increasingly is a process of polarization, a process of demonizing whoever is on the other side, and really making a caricature of their position, so that we don't have, we're not listening to each other, we don't have real debates. And well, there's also the whole thing about not even sharing the same facts, because, and I think that's the social media internet algorithm, and that should be regulated because it's a really huge problem. But how do we can we I'm part of this Plum Village community from Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, and we have one of our practice is that of deep listening and taking care of our relationship. We also have practice to manage conflicts, etc. So to me, deep listening is very important, and is also a capacity to see always, the human beings behind any position, and their capacity for goodness. And I think, sometimes because we hear what people are saying, it just triggers some reactions into us, etc. And I think we always need to be reminded that cultivating good human relationship, respectful relationship, is a way that can open doors, even when we think these doors are definitely closed. And I've experienced myself that in the book. For example, I tell the story about a Christian couple that I met in the Parliament of the World Religion, that were telling me, how they were feeling rejected into that kind of interspiritual, progressive environment. And I was, as we were, I was being nice with them and building relationship, and that way I could at some point, and because I was not trying to convince them, but just to share some information that I was having on climate change, etc. And I finally found out that, because they could feel that respect, that in me, they were opening up to this new information, and that at the end of the conversation, they were even coming back later to me to ask me something that they were curious about, and they would like to hear a different point of view that they are used to receive. So I think it's tough sometimes, because we think often it's not possible, and I agree that sometimes it's very frightening to look at what is inside, or what is being said, and from which place it's coming from in the political discussion. That can be quite frightening, but we need to find a way to always remember ourselves. We are all human beings, and we can, and good relationship is the basis for a more constructive discussion. And I think, then Master Thich Nhat Hanh said, humans are not, or human beings are not our enemies. Our enemies is ignorance, it's hate, greed, and there is a potential of that in each of us now. And I also mention in the book, how looking sometimes seeing some people against Trump shouting at Trump supporters, and I would see Trump in the people shooting at Trump supporters. So it's this potential of, hate speech, is in every one of us. And that is what we need to fight against, not any human beings.
One reason why we became so engrossed in public kinship is exactly what you just talked about. There are several points that we all have to decide to take a stand for. One is our own inward journey as to how we respect and teach and work with and learn from other people. Repairing the Breach, when we did that book, it has two frameworks to work with. One is called um, the inner workings, how you work on yourself, your personal journey that you take, and then external, that is the people around you, how you, once you do that, how you relate to those people, because you can't really do anything until you work on yourself. And I think that's the one thing. If I had a magic wand, I would, and a bag full of money, I would say, all right, all of us, we're just going to focus on us. People like focusing on themselves. And so how is it that I can do this? How can I build myself so that I have happiness and I have peace? And I think that might be something that all of us, organizations like yours and mine, can begin to work on, because one of the ideas that we have is that you have to develop a moral mind, and I'm not going to go into what that means today, it's too long. But once you do that, how we take a stand and participate and connect, that's how we build public kinship and common culture. And we are going to have a common culture if we are going, or at least close to one, if we are going to try and make this revolutionary change, which is over, I'm sure, a century from now. And they'll be saying, you know, that grand thinker Thomas Legrand got us started on this, because I don't think people change quickly. I think they take a long time, but I do believe you can't make informed decisions until people start to actually read or think, no matter how intelligent they may be. Some very intelligent, smart people make some very dumb and silly ideas and statements about other people and other societies and our own citizens. So to me, public policy over the last, you say the last 100 years, has not really supported human beings in a way that you would have them do this. And you say, which is somewhat provocative, I'm sure it must have been talked about in Europe, that you provide what you say is the actual mission of government. And it's very Rousseauian, but it's a very interesting statement. I mean, would you want to talk about that? Because I think at the heart of your discussion and our work is this idea that there is a healthier way for government and public policy to be done.
Exactly. And it starts from the recognition that rather all our institutions have been designed until now on the other way. And I quote in the book Elinor Ostrom, who is probably the most influential scholar studying institutions. And she said when she received, she was the first woman to receive the Nobel Prize in economics. And when she received that prize, she said the main lesson she learned over 50 years of research was that people like her was used to assume that people are all, let's say, selfish, like the Homo economicus, and we should design institutions based on that recognition to minimize social harm somehow. And she said the main lesson she learned along the way was that, on the contrary, we should design institutions that bring out the best in humans. And you know, it's just she just rediscovered what Aristotle, you know, said, like the purpose of the good government is to support the cultivation of virtues by the citizens, no, and or Confucius, so that, you know, just and we just we just now getting to this recognition that we have done everything in the other way because of this story of separation, you know, I was mentioning, of which, you know, the Homo economicus is a very is a materialization of it. I propose, and I think it makes sense, I propose to make being instead of having, you know, the main collective goal, and we could call being by human flourishing, or what Aristotle was calling eudaimonia. And I characterize that in two ways, which are interrelated. One is becoming who we are, that is getting more and more in touch with our true nature and expressing that in the world. And the other one is the best version of ourselves. So that is cultivating, virtues, human qualities, etc. And I think the two of them are really two facets of spiritual development. And because of our spiritual nature of interbeing, or some said oneness or unity consciousness, because we are fundamentally spiritually linked to one another, as we get closer to this true nature, we tend to develop also these human qualities and more care for one another and for the natural world. So that's why I think it's both a true human development, and it's also a human development that can heal the social and environmental crises, or even you could say the systemic crises we are facing, that calls for a shift in consciousness. So just, because we did everything wrong in terms of what we prioritize, if we put that in order, redefine, what is progress, and start organizing according to that, we can have true human development and solve the challenges we are facing. And if you like, I can go in more details in what this means in different sectors. I'm not sure we have so much space.
Please.
Well, I've already mentioned, the importance of childhood well-being, and it's like mental health. In both cases, there are a lot of research that shows that there is a potential very positive social returns for society in terms of the investments we can do in, for example, early childhood well-being or mental health. But it seems like this inner dimension is so taboo in our society that we can't tap into this potential. And the US, is the only country, the only OECD countries, rich country, that have no federal parental leave policy. We know how important it is. In Sweden, parents can share up to 16 months of parental leave with, I think, 80% of their income. We know how important are these first years for the development of childhood. What is interesting also is that a lot of these potential policies are making sense in each sector, not only as part of this general vision of the politics of being, but if you ask, for example, education experts, how to equip better people for the 21st century, their answer is more and more, well, you have to focus on personal skills, because that's a basis of success in the 21st century, basis for well-being, but also for professional success, because, we now have artificial intelligence. We now have access to a lot of knowledge online. This knowledge is constantly evolving very fast. So the basis, the solid basis for on which to rely upon in a very fast changing, uncertain world is really that kind of personal skill, character, education, value-based education, positive education. There are a lot of different approaches that are working based on these different values that I've mentioned at the beginning, that are working, and they are recognized now as a way forward by leading education scholars. In the same way that, if you look at health, because now the main burden is chronic disease, and they are linked to our lifestyle, basically the way we eat, the way we do exercise, the way we they depend a lot to this lifestyle is itself linked to a large extent to our mental health. So and we will need to empower, because of the rising cost of health in an aging population, we will need to empower much more people to take care of their own health and take care of their lifestyles. And mental health is an important lever for that. So, restorative justice also. How do we approach, in a more, we have a systemic crisis in the US of the justice systems because it's based on a wrong paradigm, that of retaliation. It's a good example I use, that's institutions that are cultivating really, it's based on our kind of instinct for retaliation. We could say that's the worst of that, what we have in us. On the contrary, restorative justice, which can be indeed more effective, is an opportunity for everyone involved to practice human qualities such as, listening, understanding, presence, compassion, courage, awareness. So that's the example I often use to say, okay, we can deal with our issues through institutions that harness the worst in us, or on the contrary, that cultivate human capacities. As we render justice, we, all the people involved, cultivate these human capacities.
Dr. Thomas, you mentioned something that's very interesting. When I used to give speeches and I would get thrown off the stage is when I would say things like, well, that's perfectly correct, because, we wanted to do restorative justice with young Black men. Well, therein would be the problem. Whites in the audience did not feel any kinship or relationship, or did not want to, with these young men. They wanted to punish them, and I mean punish them, send them away for life. Their own children, their own relatives, they would restore them. They did. They don't want restoring them. So we have in our country this baseline of race problems, which are human problems, which come about because we do not wish to be related to one another. And this is what you're talking about. And this is what many scholars now, Wilson at Harvard and other
So temporarily, Dr. Austin, we can't hear you at the moment, and you were talking about the Harvard scholar. Please pick up if you'd like on the Harvard scholar. We missed you for a second. We could not hear you.
To me?
Yes, Bobby. You were mentioning the Harvard scholar, and then we could not hear you for a few seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. So let me continue, and I'll finish real quick. I do believe public kinship is one of the keys that we must work on, that people have to feel related to one another, to want to help one another. I know that sounds selfish, but I do believe doing unto each other what we want to have to happen to for us and our relatives has a lot to do with how we feel about other people. I was amazed when I did a short discussion in Cambridge about what happened to the young man, I can't think of his name, who shot the people at prayer at Mother Bethel. After he was arrested, the policeman, in taking him, before they took him to the jail, asked him if he was hungry. I cannot imagine a policeman putting a Black child in the back of a car, and then before you get to the say, would you like a hamburger? And of course he was hungry and he said yes. That's public kinship though. And that's how you treat people. But Thomas, the thing is, how do we find a way to make public kinship work with us, for us, in a society where beings are not the central point? It's money. It's for us, and I say us because I'm an American. It's economic well-being. The election will now turn not on some issues, but they think now on economics. How, so my question, and I'm rambling here, is I do think that for us, we have to talk about, you mentioned Dr. King, we have to talk about the race issue, which is a key fulcrum for our discussion and the way our policies are developed. I don't think Europe has that same kind of problem, even though I've done some work there, and I know that there are issues of certain cultural groups that are not well thought of. But I just think that we need to find a way to come to grips with, maybe we need more discussions like this, which much larger, much larger discussions about how we learn to, just what you did in at the World Parliament of Religions. How do we learn to talk to one another first before we start expressing our opinions about what ought to be done and who ought to do what? Because we're all intelligent, and we know how to express ourselves, but bad ideas can come from very intelligent people. And I think that we have proven that over and above what we also in this country. We have some really brilliant people, but some of the things that people say these days make you wonder, where in the world do these people come from? Where have they been for the last 50, 25 years, whatever? And yet they seem to be winning the day. So I will stop at that and see if you can help me to understand how we can move from having to being.
Thanks, Bobby. Now, to answer your question, I think there are different ways to answer. Maybe I go to the most direct, I believe, is we need, more of these safe spaces to be able to truly listen to each other, and to look at, where are the roots of, these racial oppression issues in this country. We have, from France, I can see, we have an history with colonization that has not been healed yet. The American story is slightly different, but I think there have been historical traumas that we have not yet come to the to healing, and we really need to look at that differently. And I would say that there have been a lot of, if I go for a moment just in other countries in the global south with colonization and in relation to my country, for example, in France, I think there have been also, we need to recognize more like the disruption it brought to these societies, and it brought also them this kind of this story of separation, these foreign values and cultural narrative, and together with that, even a development paradigm and its emphasis on economic growth. What my research has shown is that this story of interbeing is more or less emphasized by all traditional wisdom, and really this story of interbeing and the development paradigm, the politics of being, this emphasis is from that aspect could be much more natural to some of these societies if they are able to understand, the disruption that have been that they have experienced through their history, through colonization and globalization. So in that sense, politics of being is a fundamental reconnection with the source of our cultures and of our traditional wisdom. It's also, and I'm making these calls because this concept of politics of being is coming from the Earth Charter, which says when basic needs have been met, development is primarily about being more rather than having more. And I know that spiritual religious organizations have been very involved into that drafting this language, and even we find the same sentence in some of the interreligious movement declarations. So also the reconnection to the true essence of these religions and spiritual traditions is very important to be able to bring these new development paradigm. And as you have mentioned, we see religions more and more being able to somehow give rise to the worst and the best in human beings. So there is a fundamental discussion to happen within every tradition to reflect on, what is the true meaning of the of their teachings. Getting back to these race issue in the US, I think if we look at it systemically, I think it's also linked to the general culture and this what we could call culture of domination, which are and we can oppose to culture of peace or culture of partnership. And this is you see that in terms of race, but you see that also in terms of class and other aspects. So, and I would say that politics of being is a general framework, and it's based on universal values, but that all societies also need a really deep reconnection to their purpose, to what we call for example, the soul of nations. And thanks to the worst also in human politics, we have now this language, by President Biden in his last campaign, talks about the soul of nations, and really brought a new language and a deeper look at these issues. So we have to recognize that it's an evolutionary process, and some of these challenges help us to touch what is wrong in our societies to hopefully evolve that. And in the case, I think what we need to recognize is that America have a unique chance to invent the global society of the future, and I think that it's spiritual mission. And because we have come to this country people from different continents, different culture, different races, to try to see how they can live together. If we can be mindful that this is the purpose of this country, this is what is being called to do, and I think that would also bring it. I think that's a work that America has to do. It's called to do for the world, but it's also something that can be very enriching, and we could even say give some advantage, to that country if it's able to invent a culture in which it all lives together. I would like just also to end up this with just a recognition that how I think we need to have always a compassionate look at the human beings we are dealing with in that case, and just to see that these racism and all extremism, etc., all you could say wrong behaviors and values, attitudes, etc., are very linked to suffering. It's just, they are just two faces of the same coins, and I think it's important to have this compassionate look, and that's why healing is. So you were saying, we see I see so many smart people who are telling horrible things, and just we have to recognize that it's not only about the level of education, etc. It's really about the heart and what are the wounds there, and that's why I'm emphasizing the importance of healing, and realize that if people are behaving in such ways, often there's a big mental health issues, insecurities, suffering, etc.
Well, I hate to be an American because I am one. We're going to end on that idea of the mission of America. I mean, I know there's a couple of politicians on board here, and I really think we need to have you back with a big screen all over the nation. But the mission of America is not to rape the country for economic gain, but to show how people can live together. I know we have lots of questions. We had no idea. So I'm going to ask the staff to begin to, I think they want to ask Thomas some questions. Could we do that now?
Sure, Dr. Hassan, thank you. Some of the questions and comments have come from Zakai Free, and Dr. Legrand, you've touched on racism quite a bit. And then what else do you perhaps see worldwide in terms of race and or gender? Is something that I know is discussed in your work, and we could expand and touch a little more on gender. And I, with that, would quickly point out, in terms of Dr. Austin had mentioned politicians on the line, and that public servant is former mayor, the first female mayor of Washington, D.C., Sharon Pratt. So just acknowledging her presence. Thank you. Dr. Legrand?
Yes.
Commenting on a little more on race and gender, perhaps in the global context or the U.S.
Sure. Well, I would say they are very deeply linked. And I relate that really to building this culture of peace or culture of partnership rather than a culture of domination. And gender is really, we need, a more balance with feminine values of care, non-violence, sustainability. And the obvious way to advance that agenda is through women empowerment, gender equity. That's a very important part of this cultural evolution that we need. So there are, lots of different ways for that. But it really go hand in hand. I feel, and we see, similar movement, the Black Lives Matters, about the Me Too movement. I think we are really at a moment where we need to heal really all the past. I think they are sending clear message that, we want to move to a different society, a different culture. And I see that as a kind of process of healing that is necessary to make to pave the way for another society to become possible.
I hate to break in with my staff because we did this run of show, but since you singled out, and she's my friend, and she is a brilliant thinker and was the first mayor, female mayor, gender, since we're talking about gender, in the country of a large metropolitan city. I would like to ask Mayor Pratt if she has any ideas about what we're, that I know she does. Would she mind saying something about them, really?
Well, thank you, Bobby. I've enjoyed Dr. Legrand, and it's a wonderful conversation. I'm not the type of student I am was political science, so it's a very pragmatic application of what little you know. And over the long term, I'm optimistic about where the United States is going and where Western societies are going. Over the short term, I'm not. Because at the end of the day, this hierarchical arrangement around race, around gender, is driven almost entirely by capitalism. One of the reasons that those who are descendants of enslaved people are still struggle in 2022 is that, there was such a strong economic interest in this commodity of Black flesh. And, and there was a mythology that developed around it that lives with us in 2022. And it's a convenient thing that America, and I dare say all of the Western world, don't want to deal with the nuances of that history as reflected by the very uninformed question that the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Judge, asked the other day and comment the other day about, we had a war for equality. When was that war? I don't know of it. He's talking about the Civil War. That Civil War was about a battle between the North and the South. And the reason, basically, people who enslaved were freed was to deny the South the economic advantage of the enslaved person. Not as much about, so why do I go on and on about that? It's still with us. And I dare say it will be with all of the Western powers. Why? Because the confluence also of other dynamics, just climate change. People go, and yes, there is a real inspired energy out here, as reflected by Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter. And I think that energy is going to continue. But the challenge that we all have is the tremendous grip on power of those by and large still white men on economic power and political power, so much so that they're willing to go to the look at look where we are in America right now, where people laugh at Pelosi's husband being assaulted. They laugh at it. Where people fight over just basic history. I mean, again, reflected by John Roberts' question, and he's one of the more enlightened members of the court. So this is why I am discouraged about the more immediate future, but I am encouraged by what you have observed, Dr. Legrand, about the longer term. That is that energy that is out here, but that energy and that enthusiasm is bound to have a real clash with those who still want that grip on power. And I don't think it's unique to America. I think it's a shift to the right almost everywhere. You almost got Le Pen, the conservatives, and I don't, just because you're conservative doesn't mean you're a mean-spirited person, but that conservatism has a lot to do with who gets to participate and share in this power. And we see the divide growing. It's not as if it's, it's even more dramatic than it was during the period of the Industrial Revolution. So I think we're in for a rough ride. As what did they say in All About Eve? Fasten your seatbelts. It's gonna. I mean, I think that's where we are. But I really appreciate you allowing me to participate and allow my little commentary here.
Well, I mean, you cannot, you shouldn't pass up historic figures when you can get one. And in DC, we got a lot of them, but they're very hard to get on record to say anything. But I know Sharon, so I know her passion. And Thomas, her passion is like your passion, really, you don't mind saying what has to be said, because I know you've gotten a lot of blowback on some of the things that you had to say in your book. I mean, because the economic imperative of the world that we live with would definitely say no. The reason for government is not to make sure that all people are happy and have a happy life. That's not our business. We're in business to make money. We have a corporate board, and that corporate board is the Congress and the billionaires and millionaires, and the rest of you go to work. So it's a very interesting time. Now I'm not as Sharon is my friend, but I'm not as pessimistic about now. I think we're going to change now. She's going to help us. Thomas, you certainly have started this. Washington is a place where if you come and you're on the right channels, and we're going to start doing that a little bit more, people around the world hear you. It's a big megaphone. They need to hear what Mayor Pratt has to say. They need to hear what Toby Warren has to say. They need to hear what my friend Mr. Pepper out in California has to say. And Zakai Free, who is on the line too. And I hate to have jumped all around me, but some of these people I think we might want to hear from. So I'll give it back to you. Thank you.
Sure. Given the interest of time, we are at the hour, but we are going to go a little bit longer. Want to make sure that our guest does have the opportunity to share any upcoming events or initiatives. Dr. Legrand, do you have any particular points you would like to share with the audience? And I will be putting up your social media and websites in momentarily. So you have the floor.
Yeah, no, just to conclude on what has just been said, I fully agree with. I just believe that these people don't have the solutions for what we are for. So we will definitely have a big crisis, and hopefully more and more of these lies, I would say, would come to be seen as they are, and hopefully open the way for a new politics, a new development paradigm. You can please share my website, and there are some social media, so I do a lot of different events, and I'm happy to follow, engage in more conversation with you, with all of you here.
there is Dr. Legrand's info. He is active on the social media. You're welcome to follow him. Buy the book at the website. Follow him on LinkedIn or Facebook. There's also a Twitter account. And then as far as neighborhood associates, of course, please, we encourage you to check out our website. I encourage you to join the Public Kinship Think Tank. And with that, I believe, Dr. Austin, any final words or thoughts?
Thomas, we thank you. I'd like to have another conversation, and I'd like to bring a few more community and civic and social leaders to the table. This is a conversation that cannot stop here, because this really is our children, our grandchildren. This is the future of our nation and our people. And I feel very strongly about that. I think African Americans help to define democracy as we know it today. And if we lose that philosophy of democracy, we will have lost everything that our enslaved ancestors fought for, lived for, died for. So we are going to continue these as a part of our think tank. And I want to thank everyone. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but we knew it would be like this. But we certainly thank you. And I didn't mean to take over, but I did want to do one or two little things that we had not talked about. So I'm done, and I thank you, and I'll let the staff lead us out.
Sure. Thanks again. Would appreciate Dr. Austin. Thank you, Dr. Legrand, our special guest, and you, the audience, for your participation. We hope to see you again. We continue the conversation and the journey. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.